Welcome to DT Audio, where we bring you the craziest Reddit stories on the internet. This video is strictly for entertainment purposes. The content is collected from various sources on the internet and is intended for audiences 13 and older. There is no intention to discriminate, offend, or attack any individual or organization. A redneck kept ripping out mailboxes with a chain and a monster truck for months, and everyone just had to accept it. Then the narrator's dad built an invincible mailbox using hardened tool steel and concrete, and the guy's truck got ripped apart instead. Stick around, because today's stories will leave you absolutely speechless. Story 1, Mailbox Doom, the redneck who picked the wrong target. Alright, so this happened a long time ago, back in the mid-90s. And I swear to you, it's still one of those stories that makes me grin like an idiot every time it comes up. We lived out in the country, not totally remote, but close enough that you could hear banjo music drifting in from somewhere if the wind was right. Our place was a log cabin on about 10 acres. The driveway was almost a quarter-mile long, and at the end of it ran a road that was technically a state highway. Every morning I'd walk down there to catch the bus. Then when I got home, I'd grab the mail and bring it back up the driveway like it was my daily mission. Until one Monday. I go out to get the mail and the mailbox is just gone. Not knocked over. Not tipped. Gone like somebody yanked it clean out of the ground. My dad was not the type to get loud, but his face did that quiet, dangerous thing. He immediately went to talk to the county sheriff, who lived just a mile down the road. Turns out this wasn't some random one-off. It had been happening for months all along that stretch of road. The same sick little routine, night after night. Whoever it was would toss a chain over the mailbox, hook it to the back of a truck, then drive off and rip the whole thing out. And here's the part that makes it sound like a cartoon villain. The sheriff said they suspected a guy down the road with one of those lifted, monster 4WD trucks. Problem was, they couldn't prove it. Usually it happened on Saturday and Sunday nights. Then the next morning everyone's out there staring at the wreckage like, how is this even real? Also, the nicer the mailbox, the bigger the target. People tried to fight back with sturdier wood and digging deeper, but the guy treated it like a game. Like, the tougher it got, the more he wanted to win. So my dad heard about it and basically said, challenge accepted. Now let me paint a quick picture of my dad. He was a steel worker with an engineering background, graduate degree, built like a bear. Arms like tree trunks. Most people looked at him and assumed he was just pure strength, no brains. But nope. He was calm, cool, and collected. The kind of guy who could stay level-headed even when things got stressful. But if you crossed him, you were about to meet consequences you didn't see coming. So what does he do? He goes to the hardware store and buys the fanciest, prettiest mailbox they have. Then he installs it on top of a literal 8-foot-long cylinder of hardened tool steel, 3 inches thick. He doesn't stop there. He digs down, drops the steel in, and fills it in with quickset concrete like he's building a foundation, not a mailbox. And to make it extra funny, he covers the steel core with strips of 1/2-inch wood, primes and paints it, and makes it look like a normal 4-inch post. My mom even decorates it with flowers, like it's inviting trouble. Because in my dad's mind, the best way to stop a bully is to make the next punch hurt. So I'm out the next morning, heading to school, and I look up the driveway. And there it is. The mailbox is still standing. But attached to it is a chain so long it looks ridiculous, and there's an entire hitch assembly hanging there too. Like the truck didn't just fail. It got absolutely demolished. The bolts were sheared clean. Whatever he used to yank it out had ripped right off the truck's frame. It was honestly beautiful. The sheriff gets called over, and he shows up and just starts laughing. Not a polite laugh either. The kind of laugh where you're trying to cover your mouth because you can't believe what you're seeing. Then he goes and checks the suspected guy's truck. And yep, the damage matched perfectly. Same parts, same failure points. Case closed. And here's something people don't realize. Messing with mailboxes is not just local vandalism. It's a federal crime. Like, federal prison. Not the fun, easy kind of consequences people imagine. So my dad gets unofficially rewarded by the sheriff's department with a few cases of beer and some venison. And after that, every deputy in town would give him a thumbs up whenever they saw him. That's it. That's the whole revenge. Some redneck thought yanking mailboxes was a hilarious hobby. My dad built a mailbox that could survive a small apocalypse. The guy took the bait, the truck lost, and he ended up learning what federal really means. And if you're wondering, yeah, The story still makes me giggle. Story 2, you're replaceable. So I built a better company. It all started about a year ago. I worked at a small company with around 15 employees. And yeah, it wasn't some brand new startup either. The business existed for a decade before I even joined. When I was there, it basically blew up into the top provider in the whole region for a very specific kind of service. We owned about 75% of the market. I loved my job. I loved my team. I loved the clients we served. My twice-a-year performance reviews with the owner were always perfect. No notes. No maybe you should try this. Nothing. I wasn't just doing one role, either. I handled operations, HR and payroll, customer service, marketing, schedules, training both employees and clients, and I could step in whenever someone was out sick or on vacation. If something needed to get done, I was the person they called. So when the owner announced bonuses late that summer, I was expecting something fair. My bonus was noticeably smaller than my teammates. Not by a little. By enough that it felt personal. So I asked the owner straight up. I said, "Are these bonuses based on performance? And if they are, what could I do to earn more?" And the answer I got still makes my stomach turn. He looked at me like it was obvious and said, "The bonuses aren't performance related. You're just more replaceable than the others." That's it. That was the whole conversation. I nodded, like, "Oh, okay," because I didn't want to start a fight in the middle of the office. Then I went back to work, processed the bonuses, and finished my day like nothing happened. But later, I called my spouse. Honestly, I was a little heated. Not gonna lie, I was kind of lit, emotionally speaking. But I didn't want to do something dumb and impulsive. My spouse isn't a fortune teller, but they're sharp. They've spent years on executive teams at a huge company and they've served on a bunch of business boards. They can read outcomes like most people read headlines. So we talked. We mapped out scenarios. We even consulted a business advisor and a business attorney just to make sure my next move wouldn't blow back on me. Then we made a plan. I was scheduled to go on vacation after working one more day. So I kept my head down, acted normal for the rest of that week, and left. While I was gone, the plan got clearer. I decided that when I came back, I'd resign with 2 weeks' notice. Calm. Clean. Professional. But here's where it gets wild. I came back from vacation and I was not allowed to give notice. The owner fired me immediately. Like, full rage mode. Apparently the idea of me having options was too much. To be fair, this was one of the scenarios we discussed. So I wasn't totally blindsided. Still, it pissed me off. So in the next couple weeks, I did something I had been thinking about for a while. I opened a competing business. Same general type of service, but better. I offered more customizable options, higher quality work, and results that actually matched what clients were asking for. At my old job, I had suggested those improvements multiple times, but they never got approved. Not because they wouldn't work. Not because the numbers were wrong. Because the owner didn't come up with the idea. And that was the moment I realized something. He didn't just think I was replaceable. He was actively blocking the business from improving. Meanwhile, I stayed in touch with a few people from my old team. I wasn't trying to get gossip or steal secrets. They just vented sometimes, and I listened. And what I heard was ugly. Without me there, quality slipped. Morale dropped. Clients got less attention and more delays. Even the vibe changed. You could tell the company was struggling. I also checked the reviews. Google. Facebook. The ratings were going downhill fast. Then I saw the staffing changes. They hired 2 full-time people and 1 part-time person to cover my role and parts of what I used to handle, like HR and payroll. And some of that work got farmed out to outside companies. So basically, they threw bodies at it instead of solving the actual problems. Here's the best part. My new business started growing quickly. Within 3 months, I hired several of my former teammates. Not people who needed a year to learn the job. The best ones. The ones who already performed at a high level. They were able to jump in on day one with minimal training. And as we delivered better service with better options, clients started switching over. The old company's quality kept falling. Their incoming work dried up. And that market dominance, the 75% share? It didn't just decline slowly. It collapsed. In a matter of months, they went from being the top provider to having basically nothing to sell. And remember, The owner's retirement plan was to sell the business. That plan doesn't work so well when your business is bleeding customers and losing its reputation. Now the final gut punch. My former employer is looking for employment. I know because I found out the owner applied for a position at my spouse's company over the weekend. So I had this thought. I told myself, maybe my spouse should bring him in for an interview. But then I pictured the scene. He walks in expecting a chance. And I'm the interviewer. I'm just sitting there, calm, professional, and I ask one question. How replaceable am I now? My spouse, thankfully, shut that down immediately. They said, no. Which is fair. I mean, I get it. But the lesson here is clear. If you tell your employees they're replaceable, don't be shocked when they believe you. Because some people don't just leave. They build something better. They take their talent, take their team, and take the clients too. And then you're left holding the bag, realizing the business wasn't replaceable. You were. Looks like your company was replaceable. Not me. Story 3, I upgraded the gold digger's victim, then evicted the ex. Alright, so I worked the front desk at a big luxury hotel chain for a while. Late nights, fancy lobby, and some of the most chaotic people you can imagine. I mostly worked the second and third shifts, which meant I got front row seats to the kind of mess that starts as flirting and ends with someone crying in the elevator. This one is burned into my brain. It starts with a group of young guys in suits and expensive cologne. They come in laughing, clearly buzzed, not stumbling. One of them steps up to the desk and tells me, like he's sharing a funny story, that a woman at the bar would not stop hitting on him. He says he told her no, over and over. He and his friends left. Then, once they were in the Uber, he realizes he doesn't have his room key anymore. He immediately assumes she took it. So he asks me to deactivate his keys and, if she shows up, to not let her into the hotel. Cool, simple. I do my job. But here's what felt off. While he's talking, he and his friends keep smirking at each other like this is a joke they're enjoying. And he gives me this detailed description of the woman, like he's reading a lineup. Height, body type, hair color, what she was wearing. Mocking tone and all. So I follow procedure. I pull up his reservation, deactivate the keys, and when he shows ID, I issue him a fresh set. I even offer to move him to a different room if he wants. He laughs and says no, like the whole thing is beneath him. Then, about an hour later, the front doors buzz again. My relief has arrived and is sitting up front, and I'm back there counting down the cash drawer. I'm about to head out when I see the woman come sprinting in. No shoes. She's clutching her heels in her hands like she's been running for her life. She cuts through the lobby like she knows exactly where she's going. She heads straight for the elevators. I practically jog to the desk and tell my coworker what I was told earlier. He looks confused, so he pulls up the reservation system and points at the screen. Apparently, when she arrived, she tried using the keys and they didn't work. The system shows her room number and her name. She matches the description the guy gave me, but the reservation notes say something else. Her name is listed as secondary on the booking, with his permission. So I'm standing there thinking, okay. Either this is a crazy coincidence, or this guy is lying. To be safe, I call the man in his room. I explain that a woman who matches his description is here, and she is allowed in because she's on the reservation. He laughs. Not nervous. Not apologetic. Just amused. He tells me he forgot her name was on the room and to remove it. Then I ask the question that makes everything click. I tell him, just to be clear. She was allowed at check-in, but now you want her removed? He says, don't worry. I confuse the poor girl. Then, when I suggest we call the police if she needs to be escorted out, he instantly changes his tone and says, no, that's too far. She'll get the hint. That line right there set off every alarm in my head. So I tell my coworker to hold off. I stay around and watch. A little while later, the woman comes back out of the elevators. She looks wrecked. She's crying, fully sobbing, and she's on the phone with someone. My coworker and I pretend to be busy, but we're absolutely listening. She's telling her mom and sister that she was invited to spend the week with her boyfriend and his old college friends. First night, they meet up for dinner and drinks. She says she went to the restroom, came back, and caught him flirting with another woman. Not subtle. Not respectful. Then when she confronts him, he turns ugly. He calls her names in front of his friends. Humiliates her at the bar. His buddies join in, like it's a sport. Then he tells her she's nothing without him and dumps her right there. And the worst part? He and his friends leave her stranded with no money and no ride. She tries to get back to the hotel, barefoot, using her phone's GPS, walking all the way back because he won't let her into the room to grab her wallet and luggage. Honestly, my heart just sank. I grabbed her a bottle of water and brought it to her like I'd known her all my life. I told her I overheard enough to know she's having a nightmare. Then I offered real options, not empty sympathy. I said we could call security and the police if he was blocking her from getting her things. Or if she wanted out of the situation entirely, her mom or sister could pay for a room and we'd help with a low rate, far away from him. She thanked me, took the water, and we decided she'd stay the night and sort things in the morning. But then she asked me to do something that made my eyebrows shoot up. She says, "Can you run my card? I might be able to get another room." I asked, "Another room for who?" She told me she's paying for the room they're in right now. His name is on the reservation because he booked it, but her card is what covers everything. That's when she explains the whole ugly truth. She's employed. He's not. He's living off his parents' money, and when his parents cut him off, he started living off her instead. She says he was sweet at first, doing everything for her back home, but once he met up with his friends, he flipped a switch and turned into a different person. Now, I could have told her I told you so, but she didn't need a stranger to lecture her. She needed leverage. So I gave her a revenge plan that was clean, legal, and satisfying. I told her, if you can prove the card is yours and you're the one paying, you can kick him out of the room and keep it for yourself. I explained the verification process we had on our end. Photo ID plus confirming the card details. She was shaken, but she wasn't stupid. She pulled up her banking app and showed me the information tied to her card and the hotel payment hold. It was enough. I upgraded her immediately. I moved her to the biggest suite we had, full access to the hotel amenities, and I told my coworker to send champagne and strawberries up on the house. And here's where it gets even more brutal for him. Because upgrading her meant moving her stuff. Her ex's room had to be vacated. If anyone stayed after we demanded it, the hotel would be forced to escort them out or charge them for the room. So my coworker grabbed master keys, a bell cart, and went to retrieve her luggage. Meanwhile, I made her new key set and sent her up to the new room. Then my phone rang. It was him. He was furious that my coworker had entered the room and was taking her belongings. I stayed calm and professional. I told him we couldn't share private guest information, and since he no longer had a valid payment method on the room, he needed to either pay or leave. He went off. Screaming, demanding, threatening. But my coworker wasn't listening to his tantrum, and the friends in the room were telling him to chill. I gave him a courtesy window. 10 minutes to handle payment. Then I told him, if he didn't, the hotel would call authorities and have him evicted. He hung up. 9 minutes later, he didn't answer the phone. I called again. Nothing. Third time, he answered just to hang up again. So I called the police. When the officers arrived, you could feel the air change. The guys in the room went pale when they saw uniforms. Like, instant realization that this wasn't a bar fight, this was their consequences. The cops explained they were being evicted. He tried to talk to me, but the officers told him to only speak to them. At that point, his friends started offering to pay for the room, like that would magically fix everything. The cops asked me if that was acceptable. I smiled, real slow, and said no. Then the officers started escorting them out and getting their things. He left last, carrying his bags himself and complaining that he didn't even get a luggage cart. His friends looked pissed at him, and honestly, I couldn't blame them. After it was all done, my coworker told me the woman was settled in the suite. She loved it. She declined the champagne. She just wanted to sleep. I didn't get to see her again after she left the next day, but I heard the ex kept calling the hotel and trying to trash us with bad reviews. He lied, of course. But the point is, he didn't get to keep her stranded, humiliated, and powerless. He got removed from the property like he should have been from the start. Story 4, evicted for her art, then the house got turned into a beige nightmare. It all started about a year ago, and honestly, it was one of those stories where you just know something's off the second you hear it. In our area there was this house everyone talked about, not because of the outside, but because of what was inside. From the street, it looked like a cute little cottage. Nothing wild. But step through the door and it was like walking into a fairy tale museum. Every wall had hand-painted murals, full of characters and scenes, like Disney-style stories and classic storybook vibes. The previous tenant was an actual art teacher back in the day, and later she got into wine paint nights, then commissions, then furniture decorating. She wasn't just into art. She built her whole life around it. And the wild part is, she was genuinely nice. Even when I was being a jerk to her about truck noise and speeding, she didn't turn it into a whole drama thing. We smoothed it out, and we ended up being friendly. Now here's what made it extra complicated. She had an agreement with the original landlord that the murals were part of the deal. Because the art was inside, not outside, it wasn't supposed to be an issue. She'd been living there since the mid-80s, and she'd been patient for years, waiting for the house situation to be finalized. Then the original landlord passed away. Before anything ever got signed and made official, his kids took over. One of the sons came to inspect the property with his daughter, and they apparently fell in love with the house. Not the house itself, but the idea of it. The daughter wanted it, and they wanted the art. Like, this place is perfect for my future. And we want the walls. The problem was, my neighbor didn't have a formal lease. So when it came time to push her out, they had a much easier path. They basically used the murals as the excuse to kick her out. No real fight, no real fairness. Just, we don't like this, and you're done. She was devastated. But she didn't stay stuck. She managed to buy another property last minute in another state, and it even had a real art studio space on the first floor. The timing was crazy, like she had to sprint to get her life back. But while all that was happening, she still had to deal with the house being taken from her. She originally wanted to leave it alone, like, fine, take it, but at least don't wreck it. The one good thing in the whole mess was that a friend of hers stepped in and offered to restore the place to Rebecca standards. That's what they called it. Not fancy, not artistic, just the way the house looked when someone flipped it and decided the world only needed one color palette. And since he needed to learn how to use powered paint sprayers anyway, he offered to do the work for free. He even had a landscaping friend help with the front so the cottage facade could be removed without destroying the structure. So they moved her furniture into storage. Fast. Like, she was out of the house in a week after everything got cleaned out. Then the second week hit. They sanded the walls from front to back, and when the murals were gone, it wasn't even like, oh, the art was removed. It was worse. It looked like blotches of color underneath the sanding, like the house was bruised. My friend, being the kind of painter who never half commits to anything, masked everything that wasn't paint. Then he went to work with his new sprayer and covered the walls in primer. It was so efficient it felt unreal. He could knock out a whole wall in just a few passes. Once it dried, he used the Rebecca color set, which basically meant white walls with gray everywhere. That depressing, no-life flipper look. The house had tile floors, so he didn't touch those. But the walls went to white semi-gloss. And the wood paneling, trim, switch plates, outlet covers, counters, cabinets, everything that used to be warm and real got sprayed this dead, lifeless shade of gray. When I finally went by to see it, I swear the house looked like it was holding its breath. It felt empty, even though it was still physically full of rooms. It was weird not seeing those murals anymore. The place looked like a showroom for nothing. And the front yard? That part was a whole other level. The last thing they agreed to was removing the cottage facade. The landscaping guy basically tore it out and then replaced it with what I can only describe as a gravel and sand dump, with a couple rocks thrown in like they were trying to decorate with leftover landscaping material. So when I went to help fix some stuff at an older neighbor's place, I noticed the house was still empty. I asked around, and the neighbor told me that earlier in the week there were U-Hauls there, but nothing ever got unloaded. That was the last anyone had seen. Which, honestly, makes me think the daughter is about to have a rude awakening. Because she wanted the art house, right? She wanted the magic of those painted walls. And what she got instead was the same house, stripped of its soul, turned into a basic beige hellhole, and left sitting empty like a prank that never ended. Story 5, she tried to rip me off at move out, so I made her pay twice. It all started about a year before I finally got out of that duplex. The owner was actually a solid guy. Honest, reasonable, and he didn't play games. I put down a real security deposit, moved in, and for a while I thought, okay, maybe I got lucky. But there was one problem. The owner wasn't the one I dealt with day to day. That job belonged to Giselle. And look, Giselle was one of those people who can turn any normal interaction into a power trip. She lived on the other side of the duplex, so she was always around, always watching, always ready to remind me of the rules. She acted like the place was some kind of HOA kingdom and I was the annoying tenant who didn't know how to bow. If my friends parked an inch too far on her side, she'd yell. If my doorbell or phone rang and it wasn't quiet time, she'd come out like I was running a nightclub. I'd drop rent checks in the mail slot like I always did, and somehow they'd go missing until she felt like letting me know everything was fine. And when stuff broke, repairs took forever, like she was personally committed to keeping me just uncomfortable enough. Honestly, it wasn't even scary. It was just exhausting. I told myself I'd deal with it until my lease ended, then I'd be out and done. Then I found out why she hated me so much. Apparently, the owner had turned down a friend of hers for the unit because her credit was bad. Meanwhile, my credit was great, so I got approved. Giselle didn't just dislike me. She was furious that she couldn't get her way. So she decided the best revenge was making my life miserable. As my lease was getting close to ending, I noticed the water heater was leaking. Not a tiny drip either. Enough that I was drying the floor, throwing towels down, and trying to stay ahead of it. I emailed Giselle right away. No response. A week later, I forwarded the email, politely warning her that this could turn into a bigger problem. Still nothing. Then I sent another message saying a friend who's a plumber looked at it and recommended immediate action. Finally, she replied, "I will look into it." And just like that, she basically hit the pause button. I could feel the strategy. She wasn't trying to fix it. She was trying to run the clock out on me before move out. At this point, I was only weeks away from leaving. The leak was still an issue. One day I saw Giselle outside, watering her flowers, and I walked over and mentioned it again. She brushed me off and ended the conversation with a threat. She said she was going to be strict about the final inspection. She told me if I wanted any of my deposit back, I'd better pass some white glove nonsense. Okay. Cool. So she wanted to play hardball. A week later, I got my chance. Right before my last rent payment was due, I happened to see the owner around the neighborhood. Giselle wasn't anywhere in sight. I went up, thanked him for renting to me, and kept it friendly. He was nice. Said he was sorry I was leaving, and that if I needed anything, I could let him know. That's when I hit him with a real plan. I asked if he could come by and do the security deposit inspection. He said sure, and we went into my unit together. He walked around, checking things, nodding like everything looked great. Then we got to the closet where the water heater was. I paused for effect, opened the closet doors, and showed him the mess. I told him what I'd been doing to manage the leak and warned him that mold is not a fun surprise, especially when it starts growing where people can't see it. I pulled out the towels I'd been using. They were wet, disgusting, and proof that this wasn't maybe or someday. The owner went quiet for a second and asked, "Have you told Giselle about this?" I told him yes. Then I handed him copies of my emails. He looked through them, noticed I'd kept everything in a folder, and then his whole attitude shifted. He straight up asked if there were other issues that hadn't been fixed. I showed him a few more things I'd documented. And that's when Giselle's little scheme collapsed. The owner turned beet red and said something along the lines of, "Okay, based on what I'm seeing, I'm comfortable releasing your full security deposit." Then I realized I had one more move. I still had one rent check due for $750. So instead of writing the full amount and waiting on deposit drama, I suggested a simple math deal. I told him, "How about I write a check for $250, and you handle the rest since the deposit covers the difference?" He shrugged like it was no big deal, signed the paperwork, and left. A few days later, I mailed the $250 check. That evening, Giselle came storming up to my door. She was furious, screaming that I didn't pay the full rent amount and that she could get me evicted if I didn't write the rest of the money immediately. I stayed calm and explained it to her like she was missing something obvious. I said, "The owner already did the security deposit inspection. My security deposit is $500. So $750 minus $500 equals $250. That's what I paid." Her eyes widened like her brain was buffering. Then she lost it. She yelled about how that's not how things are done, and that the rules mattered, and that she had final say because she did the inspections. But here's the thing. She was standing on my porch and she didn't have the one document that mattered. So I told her, very directly, that the owner had done the inspection, had signed off on the payment arrangement, and she could take it up with him. Then I told her to get off my porch and stop bothering me. I watched her freeze again, like she couldn't process a tenant who wasn't scared of her. And then, just like that, I moved out. When it was time for the next tenant, the owner came by to fix the water heater. While he was working, we talked, and he casually mentioned his daughter was moving into my unit and would take over the on-site landlord duties. I asked what happened to Giselle. The owner said she was moving out too. She decided she couldn't afford to pay the full rent anymore. So yeah. She tried to push me out and squeeze me at move out. But the moment I put the real decision maker in the room and let the receipts speak, she got exactly what she was trying to force on me. Not just a loss. A full collapse. That's all for today. Which story was your favorite? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video for more insane stories from DT Audio.